Hey guys, making another video today. Today is Thursday, November 6th. Now my hair kind of looks crazy. I had it in like a comb thing, or I don't know, some sort of thing that like kind of held it up because it was getting in my face, so it just looks crazy after I let it out. I'm gonna make sort of a shorter video today, and I wanted to make a video today about fasting. It's another one of those things that I've mentioned several times, but when I looked back, I didn't actually make a full video about it. So, I wasn't even entirely sure where to begin because there's so many different things going on there with fasting, all the different places it's mentioned. I think the first thing I'll start off with is, I've said before, I'm not Catholic or Greek Orthodox, and so I'm like technically Protestant, but I don't actually identify with any certain denomination or something, or non-denominational itself. I just try to follow God and where He wants me to go. But one of the two things, so I'll say it like this: there are two things that Catholics and Greek Orthodox say about Protestants. Some kind of gripes that they have with Protestants that I definitely agree with. The first is Protestantism causes way too many cultural Christians, which it does. I know because I was one of them. And the second is fasting. In Protestantism, most of the people I know have never even heard of fasting. Like, yeah, you read it in the Bible, but like their church has never ever said anything about it. Ever. And I remember growing up when I went to church for, I don't know how many years, on and off, till I was, 16, 17 or so, and in those years I never heard anything about it. For some reason, Protestant churches just don't say anything about fasting, even though we should. But it can be done for the wrong reasons. So you need to actually make sure it's for the right reason. You're not just doing it for your own, I guess, to seem like you're a better person to God, and there's no real reason for it, that you're actually doing it. If it's like that, then you shouldn't be doing it. Sorry, there's like a crick in my neck. And the main thing I'm talking about there comes from Zechariah 7. I believe that I just read it was the men of Bethel came up to entreat the Lord and came to Zechariah about fasting. This was after the people came back to Jerusalem from the exile in Babylon, which was, I believe, 70 years. So, and then I believe Zechariah was actually a little bit of time after like the initial like coming back, so it may have been like 80 to 90 years after the exiles came back. I said that completely wrong. It may have been 10 to 20 years after the exiles came back. But the men of Bethel came to entreat the Lord, and what they were going to ask was, should we continue to fast in the 5th and 7th months as we have been doing for these past 70 years? And you might say, well, why did they say 70 years? Then I just said, oh, it may have been 10 to 20 years later. The math doesn't add up. At least based off of going in the little brief summary before each book. It mentions that, at least if that's accurate, the one before Zechariah kind of states the years in which he did that stuff was probably a little bit after they came back, so I'm not entirely certain if that's correct. But yeah, they came to entreat the Lord, should we start fasting again, or should we let it go? like these past 70 years we've been doing. And God says, for these past 70 years, have you been actually fasting for me? Have you been doing it for the right reasons? Let me pick it up and say the exact words. It is, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th months for the past 70 years, was it really for me that you fasted? And when you were eating and drinking, were you not just feasting for yourselves? Are these not the words the Lord proclaimed through the earlier prophets when Jerusalem and its surrounding towns were at rest and prosperous? This is what the Lord Almighty says. Rather, instead of like being so concerned with fasting at the moment, God says, administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor, and do not plot evil against each other. So it definitely matters on why you're fasting. Sometimes if we're not feeling like, oh, we're good enough, or obviously we can't ever actually be good enough, but if it's something like that, go do what's right. Be a good person and follow what Jesus commanded. It could be something as simple as that. As God saying, those people of Bethel, I'm guessing, were not doing those things. Because it says after God said that, they kind of went away annoyed and like, okay, who said that to us? So, it definitely matters on why. And the why can be, a couple of reasons. If you want to just feel closer to God, to honor God. Lots of times in the Bible, it was done for wisdom and mourning. I believe I looked up before this, and then one of the examples was like Ezra. They fasted for wisdom, and then let me see. I'm trying to remember like all the places in my head. Obviously, Jesus says about his disciples when the Pharisees are asking, why aren't they fasting? Me and John's disciples are fasting. And Jesus says, why would they fast when the bridegroom is with them? They shall fast after I'm gone. So, there is definitely a thing there to do it. Jesus is saying to do it. And I know some people might say, he's just talking about the apostles, but no. We know from the entirety of the Bible and what Jesus says there that it's something we should all do at some point. Now, should you do it every single week, at a set time? To be honest, I don't think so. I think that kind of makes it kind of like a chore to do, makes it kind of blend in with your routine and makes it bland. It's not actually for a good reason. It's just, I gotta do it because it's this time of the week. I don't think you should be doing that, because I tried that and I realized it wasn't right. And there's different types of fasts. One is food, obviously, and another, I believe I saw it said in 1 Corinthians 7, I believe, when I looked it up, which said another type of fast is from sexual relations, and it was to focus on, prayer and reading the Word, and not just a time of not giving into sexual relations and just devoting time to God. I know most people in Protestant denominations have just never really thought about this until I had my experience almost a year ago. I'd never thought about it. Never. Never crossed my mind that it was a thing that I should ever do. Excuse me. But it can be very important. especially when you have an important decision coming up, or there's something like, I should say, bad going on. Because it's like, if you or someone you know is very sick, you can be fasting and praying, feeling closer to God and praying for them in that way. But most of the time, it's usually for wisdom and just kind of honoring God. Most people today won't really say to fast as like a way of mourning really anymore. That's just kind of something that was in the Old Testament, really. But it is a very, very, very important tool to feel close to God. It is not a way of being like, hey God, I'm here, I'm doing something good, look at me. It's not that. It is a way of literally being closer to God. I cannot express that, enough. Literally being closer to God. One thing I heard a while ago, and I don't really know if I don't hold it to be like, 100% true, but I thought it was an interesting thing to say. One of the things I saw someone on YouTube say a while back was, back in, Old Testament times, they would burn incense to God, and, it would be a pleasing aroma to the Lord, basically. And when we're fasting, it's our fat burning. We burn our fat. And one of the things also when sacrificing animals is to burn the fat in the Old Testament. So there's kind of a cool connection there between, us and that, where it's like if you're fasting, the fat in your body is being burned and giving off a spiritual aroma, kind of, to the Lord. Now, I don't know if that's entirely, actually true, but, I thought it was kind of neat. A neat, comparison and stuff like that. But there are some fasts we can do in this world that are not completely spiritual that I would also advocate for, which is a phone fast, video game fast, I don't know. Those are the main things. I guess I could say in general, screens where possible. I know a lot of people use them for work and don't really have an option there, but something like as simple as that, like distractions, fasting from that for a time can definitely also be very helpful to just kind of devote that time instead to God, reading the word, prayer, whatever. And I will say, do not mix the two up. While yes, that can be very beneficial, that is not real fasting. Always remember, real fasting is not eating food. Obviously, during that fast, you should not just go do whatever you want. You shouldn't not eat and then, you're still not praying. You're going to, play a game, read a book, I don't know, go hang out with friends. You shouldn't be doing that. If you're fasting, you should actually be using the time wisely. Being with God in prayer, reading the word, whatever, stuff like that. If you're fasting and you have to be out somewhere, obviously something like that's probably going to be like work. Jesus says, do not be like the hypocrites who try to show that they're fasting with like a gaunt appearance to seem like they're better spiritually than others because they're doing it. No, Jesus says, to make sure you look presentable and still look fine, and to do it in secret, basically. It's not something to be parading around. I just wanted to highlight the importance of it. If you feel like you've been going through a season where you haven't been close to God, try fasting. And if you're not used to it, if you've never done it, I definitely would not, I don't think I would recommend starting off with like a 3-day, 7-day fast or something. Maybe just try one day or 2 days or something like that. I don't know. I would definitely say to pray about it in the first place. That's between you and God, but I would recommend fasting. I guess before I end, I'll dive a little bit deeper into my own experience with it like a year ago. I've done it since then, but like a year ago, in my experience. When I had that experience a year ago, that the Holy Spirit, I wasn't even fully fasting for a day or 2 days or 3 days or whatever. I was actually doing intermittent fasting while also praying. But it was while I was a cultural Christian. And I was intermittent fasting, not even for spiritual reasons. It was for just trying to lose weight. Because at that time, I had no idea that fasting would bring you closer to God. I just so happened to also be praying about, God help me with fighting lust and pornography and stuff like that. And, as a result, I started to get closer to God during that period. And then, I had the whole thing with basically encountering demons and the Spirit protecting me. And then after that, I've been free of pornography and what was the other thing? Pornography and fear. Or I guess I should say specifically anxiety. Now, obviously, I have it from time to time, anxiety where, in normal circumstances or something like that, but generalized, where I had it generalized in a lot of situations every day. And I just don't have that anymore. So, lots of times when people say, how do you quit pornography and stuff like that, it's I didn't do anything. It was God who took it away from me. It was not me being so good and great at defeating it and never giving into it. God took it away from me. Now I will say part of that may have been taking the evil spirit away from me, which I will also say, unfortunately, many cultural Christians definitely have a possibility of having an evil spirit in them, attached to them, following them, whatever. And they just have no idea. I had no idea. I would have never thought I would have. But I did. And, yeah, when it comes to pornography and stuff like that, God just took it away from me. Praise be to God. Through no good works or acts of my own. And it can just be very important and very helpful to fast. You don't know how it could help you or what God's trying to show you through it. Cool. One thing I did forget that I wanted to mention, I guess it's just a little side note that doesn't actually have to do with this current bit, which was, there's also a fast that Daniel did where he kind of just stopped eating choice meats and stuff like that and didn't use lotions, and I believe it, can't remember if it was also wine, but it was a period of mourning and stuff like that, and he was fasting and whatnot for God. So it can vary, but the reason needs to be there. The reason for Daniel obviously was mourning and being close to God. It wasn't because he was oh, look at me, Lord, I'm fasting, I'm so good. That wasn't why he did it. He just may have done it a little bit differently, the actual act of it. I thought this would be a short video, but I see that it's approaching 20 minutes now. I wanted to encourage people to think about fasting. I know there are a lot of you who have never even thought of it. I never did. Never crossed my mind. I would definitely say to be mindful of the water intake as well. Because if you just immediately start to fast, I don't know, maybe like 3 days without food or something, and you're like, sometimes you'll be like trying to drink water, but then you'll say, oh no, maybe I'll go a little bit without water, or something like that. I would definitely say to continue to drink water. At least for me personally, I tried to do a 3-day fast. Maybe it was 2 months ago or so, 2 or 3 months ago. And during that experience, I basically also went without water for like in the middle day. The second day, I think I had like no water, and into that night, plus like the half of the first day, I didn't have water. So it was like a day and a half I had like no water. And during like the second night, I think it was the second night, maybe around like 3-4 a.m. of the second night, I couldn't sleep and I was actually having hallucinations. So there's definitely some things that you might see if you take it too far. I'll say that. Just be careful and know your limits. I just tried to do it without really caring about what my limits might be at the moment. Now, it wasn't like some crazy, hallucination. It was nothing like that. I just saw like a tiny little, just funny little person that was like that big, sitting on the floor or standing on the floor or something. I just saw him like disappear into the wall. I can't remember what else I saw. It was just like some like funny looking stuff or something. It wasn't like actually like scary or anything. But just be careful when you're fasting not to take it too far. God will show you through it, the reason he wants you to do it, and the outcome that might come from it. Today is November 6th, Thursday. Hope everyone has a great weekend starting tomorrow, obviously, and a good night.